You're up. I would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee dated the 11th of June 2024. I now declare the meeting open at 10 o'clock. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. Attendees and leave of absence. I believe there's no one. Mayor Raven is in the building. So he'll be joining us shortly because I don't have a leave of absence from him. Confirmation of previous minutes. There is now a motion displayed on the screen. Yeah, that the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee being held, dated on the 14th of May, be confirmed. I have a mover and Councillor Murphy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lane. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? Being none, I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Been carried unanimously with the noted that Mayor Raven is still not in the building or in the room. The motion has been carried. Thank you, councillors. Declarations of conflict of interest. I now defer to declarations of conflicts of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare of conflict of interest today? There being none, I will now refer to the reports on today's agenda. First report, item 6.1, is the public report for the Capital Roadworks and Drainage Program quarterly report. I refer to the Director of Transport Water Services, Mr. Silvio Trinco. Mr. Darryl Riley, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will restrict my comments today, given that we have a reasonably full agenda. The report talks to our quarterly performance on our road and stormwater infrastructure delivery. If I can have the report up. It goes through and details all the projects we're currently working on and gives some background on that. I won't run through all of those. That information is there for councillors to refer to and can reach out if they have questions. Just to give some advice on how we've run with the program to date, we're still delivering in front of our revised capital expenditure. We've come back somewhat. We were probably around 110% around the Christmas period. We have had some difficulties, as councillors are aware, on some of our projects, but we're still trending to 103% of our amended or 106% of the original. Our original budget was 125 million for the year, and our revised budget is somewhere in the high 130s to 140. I think it's 139. I'm open for any questions if people have questions in regards to the report.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Darryl. Just wanted to note the Calvert Avenue Catchment Master Drainage and the Kelly Street Catchment Master Drainage. Thank you to your team. We had a town hall meeting. The public got to get to speak to the drainage team as well as the mayor and myself. That went well, and we provided them with as much information, being that the new contractor BMD Proprietary Limited have started out on site. They're doing a fantastic job, and if the general public want any information, council does have a website where they can go and get any updates. I just thank you. I reached out to Erin yesterday and said thank you to the team as well. I believe most of the comments are starting to slow down and we're moving in the right direction, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. No further questions? Being there's no further questions, we have a recommendation on the board. Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Murphy, seconder, Councillor St Ledger. All those in favour? And carried unanimously with the exception that the Mayor's not here. Move on to item 6.2, the Trunk Road and Stormwater Infrastructure Refunds. It's a public report. Back over to you, Mr. Darryl Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please forgive me, this is a little complex, but hopefully I can explain it well. Associated with development projects that occur across the city, there are frequently some frontage works which occur on trunk roads. In a normal scenario, that trunk work is less than the infrastructure charges which are applicable to that development. Under planning regulations, the developers are able to make a claim against their infrastructure charge for an offset. So if they do $20,000 worth of work on that trunk infrastructure and they have $30,000 worth of infrastructure charges to pay, they effectively get to have an offset against the 30 for the 20,000 and they pay the residual of 10. It only applies to trunk infrastructure, so only those major collector roads or major collector stormwater where that applies, and the planning scheme's quite clear around that, and it provides opportunities for the developers, if they have that infrastructure, to be able to make application to the planning court if council doesn't provide those offsets. In some smaller circumstances, the amount of work which they do, and typically the work is only work which would actually benefit the community in direct relationship to that development, so it would be around access or increased traffic. But in some circumstances, those charges may exceed the infrastructure charges, and under the Planning Act, they're then entitled to a refund, which would then be, they don't pay infrastructure charges, but council would end up with an obligation. If it was, say, $50,000 worth of work they did, and we had $30,000 of infrastructure charges, they would be entitled to a refund of $20,000. All of that action occurs in DA. In the small circumstances where we end up with a refund component, that is actually entered into in an infrastructure agreement where council actually ties to the development all of the conditions which actually outline what that refund would be. The refunds are refunded from the constrained infrastructure charges reserve, which is effectively the infrastructure charges which have been charged on other developments, and are refunded out of that area. There is a slight anomaly at the moment that all occurs within the planning space, but we haven't accounted well for how we actually pay that refund or where we record that information. So where we've had these in the past, we've actually brought a report to council to amend the local government infrastructure program, which is part of the planning scheme, to be able to add those projects to the local government infrastructure program, which is a significant undertaking for that change, for then us to be able to use that as the statement of intent, which means we can bring it onto the capital program. By the time that report comes to committee, the infrastructure agreement's already signed. There is no obligation, there is no option for council. It's already a commitment. The report as put forward is suggesting that rather than bringing that report to council to change the local government infrastructure plan when there is no choice but to make the payment anyway, to give the roads infrastructure delivery manager the ability on the signing of an infrastructure agreement to actually add that to the capital program. That maintains some consistency around the program and also works in the space where we audit that process every year to make sure that all of our projects are added to the program in an appropriate mechanism that will provide the head of power which actually provides that. I understand that that's probably a lot, and I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. We've got a couple. First one from Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Daryl, just a quick question. How often would we be doing this, like as in the developer doing the project on behalf of council and then us giving the refund? Like, is it 50%? How often would this happen?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Typically we would see 2 or 3 of these a year, and typically the works aren't the whole project. So if within our forward planning we had upgraded an entire road, normally its conditioned infrastructure would only be that work which is generally fronting that development. It's not that we're providing significantly large projects through that process in general terms. I think the exception to that was Point Corp Council considered on one occasion, which was a considerable size project. I would expect that to be coming back to council before the infrastructure agreement's even signed.
Thank you. And is it just a percentage of the infrastructure fee, or can they use all of that infrastructure fee as a return fund to them because they're providing the infrastructure?
In terms of offsets, the full value of the infrastructure charges that they are levied with their development are applied first to that infrastructure. So that would be all of the infrastructure charges applicable to them. And then if there is a residual left after that, that would be the portion which would fall into refund.
Okay, thank you very much. Not as much as I thought there was going to be. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks to Councillor Murphy. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Mr Chair, through you. Are there circumstances where infrastructure that's installed by the developer actually doesn't comply with our local planning laws?
That would certainly be the case. So for most subdivisions, all the access streets, all the local street drainage, etc., are all not trunk infrastructure. The only work which is actually captured by this is those more major roads where there's a greater benefit for the greater community. So that is laid out within the planning scheme, which portion of the road networks that is, and the DA team make that assessment at the time when they're doing the approval. So that is done before this would come about, but it is in accordance with the requirements that are laid out in the Planning Act. Yep.
Thanks. So there's no circumstances where we refund money and then have to go in and fix things up at our cost?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the question?
So an example is where a developer may make a mistake in their trunk infrastructure builds. Is there circumstances where we've had to make repairs or make better the installations at cost to council while still giving that refund?
Thank you. The work which the developer has to do would be outlined in the infrastructure agreement. So at that point, at the time of the development approval, there would be a decision made on the infrastructure that has to be provided. So that has been conditioned by council. So that decision would have been a council decision on the infrastructure which is provided. The subsequent part to the question, which is around the longevity of infrastructure that's built by developers, is probably a tangential question, but is one that the work is inspected by the DA team during the construction. It has a 12-month defects liability attached to that, where the contractor, 12 months, where the contractor is responsible for those. But once they transfer to council, then they are our responsibility to maintain from then on.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Mr Rowley, you referred to some matters coming back to us if it was over a certain amount. What's that amount?
I don't think that the amount is so much a trigger amount as if we take the Point Corp example, which has happened in the past, that whole development was contingent on bringing forward a significant amount of work which council needed to endorse. So I think if there were decisions of that nature, I'll be expecting DA to bring those back because it was about instigating or supporting bringing on development in a whole development front. Yep.
No more questions? Being no more questions, there's a recommendation up on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion, for recommendation? Councillor St Ledger, I've got a seconder, and Councillor Hall. All those in favour? Councillor Bradley?
I'm abstaining, thank you.
That's passed, except for Councillor Bradley. I believe that's the end of business for you, Mr Darrell Riley. Do we have any general business for the Road Infrastructure Delivery Manager, Councillor Wilcox?
Thank you. It was remiss of me not to ask this in 6.1. Apologies. Just wondering if we have start dates for Teviot and Cusack, because it's got construction commencing 23-24. I note that we're June 11th, so that gives them less than 20 days to start construction there. And a start date for the Teviot Road upgrade, because it now has 24-25 pending final project approvals.
Through you, Mr Chair. So Teviot Road is scheduled for a commencement in July, and we are still progressing to that. That was the second project. I'm sorry, I misheard the first one because I thought it was also Teviot Road.
It is, they're both Teviot Road.
Oh,
So
Homestead
the other
was-
one was Teviot and Cusack, the intersection on the Black Spot funding.
I'm sorry, I will need to come back to you on that. I don't know that off the cuff. I know that it has been progressed, but I will come back to you with the date.
Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I raise some problems faced by residents that use Glen Road in Logan Reserve. Now, the section of Glen Road that we're talking about is a section that is a rural residential road. In 2020, only 13 houses use this section of road. It's a 200-metre stretch. It's a one-way out. And that was appropriate for a rural residential estate. In 2024, over 200 houses now use that road. Not 13, not 20, 200 in 4 years, and that 200-metre section of road hasn't been upgraded. No footpaths, no proper curb, no widening, and it's getting to a point where many residents have told me that this is a risk to their safety due to the amount of traffic using this road that was never designed to support that volume. Now, the way that roads are normally upgraded in Logan Reserve is either developers upgrade it or council upgrades it. The issue identified with this 200-metre section of road is that the properties that front it are privately owned and the development potential due to flood mapping is limited. Now, that poses a risk that over the long term, this 200-metre section of road won't be developed, which means the developers won't upgrade that section of road, which means its current state will continue in the future as even more houses get built attached to it. The other party that tends to upgrade roads in Logan Reserve is council. So I've asked council officers to go and do a deep dive investigation into what are council's plans to upgrade this section of road in the case that the development and the private industry doesn't get around to it. I wanted to ask the expert road planner here today, what is the status of that investigation and when should the community expect to get that report back so we can advocate for better results?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So Glen Road is a rural format road, or has been in the past a rural format road, as you quite accurately highlighted. It has, for a significant portion of it, been improved by development in that in that area, with the section remaining as you have referenced. That section of road is on Council's pavement rehabilitation program. The pavement rehabilitation program looks at the condition of the road itself. We currently have a rehabilitation of that pavement listed for 2026 as our delivery year, and our asset team is in the process of investigating what rehabilitation of that pavement might look like. That being said, that won't provide the standard or the increase to the road, which would include curb and channel, stormwater and the likes. It really is about life extension of the pavement. The road itself, and typically, I guess leaning back to the report I spoke to earlier, the majority of the rest of the road would have been trunk road, I believe, with offsets to developers when it was actually delivered. I understand from DA that there is a small section which might still have some development potential, but there is definitely a section which they are saying will not, and it certainly does tie in with that there is water inundation of the road and properties at that location. The balance of that upgrade is a project that would be considered under the under the PIA sub-program, so the priority infrastructure area, when the next local government infrastructure plan comes up with the planning scheme. So similar to the trunk roads, which would sit in the rest of the development area, that project would be considered with that. So that will come to council as part of, I understand, the 2025 scheme review around whether the project would be included in there for upgrade. It would be in competition with all the other roads which are within that local government infrastructure plan area, which is the likes of Park Ridge Road, Logan Reserve Road, Green Road. And I can't comment at this stage whether that will attract funding at that stage, but I can talk to the fact that we will continue to do investigation on the condition and look to make sure that we maintain the road in a safe format.
Thank you. So council sees this road that has urban developments approved by council on it to be a rural format road. The community has to wait until the 2025 planning scheme to see if council plans to upgrade it. And at the very minimum, there will be a rehab of the road in 2026. What can the community do to push to advocate to get this road to have more priority within council?
The decisions on the local government infrastructure plan will come to council for consideration. We will provide advice on all the roads that need to be upgraded, but in terms of, I guess, that advocacy, it is potentially with councillors.
Thank you.
All good? No more questions? Thank you, Mr. Riley, for all your help again. Enjoy your day. Our next report, is Megan here? Hey Megan, how are you? Is a response to the e-petition about flood awareness mapping. It's a public report, and leading the charge would be the Acting Road Infrastructure Planning Manager, Ms. Megan Gould.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. So this report has been tabled in response to the e-petitions that were raised in 2022 following the release of the flood awareness mapping. The report is as tabled, and I'll take it as read, but I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Looks like there's no questions, being that we're just noting the e-petitions, all we're doing.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to note the report.
Do we have a mover for the motion? Councillor Bradley, seconder. Councillor Hall, all those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. That was a quick one. Does anyone have any general business for Megan before she runs off? No, no one does. False alarm. Moving on to the next one, this report 6.4, the endorsement of the water Nesterve plan. It's a public report. And we go straight to the group manager for Logan Water, Mr. Paul Heaton. All yours.
Thank you, through the chair. We actually have 3 papers on the agenda today. All 3 of them are associated with our meeting our regulatory requirements under both federal and state legislation. This first paper is associated with the Network Services Plan for Logan Water. It's essentially the local government infrastructure plan, which many of you will be familiar with by another name, simply because the water business is legislated under a different piece of legislation. They actually call it the Network Services Plan. As outlined in the paper, this is a process that we go through seeking council's endorsement for that plan. We then have to go to the planning minister to get his approval, and then we come back to council for the adoption. The Network Services Plan has been developed in conjunction with the broader council local government infrastructure plan 1.3, so they actually are fully aligned and talk to each other. So that's essentially it. Happy to take any questions on that, but obviously seeking committee's endorsement for that plan.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No? Oh, Theresa Lane? Councillor Lane? No, you're happy to move it? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bradley? All those in favour? Being carried unanimously. Next one's confidential. Next report is a confidential report. I note that item 6.5 is a confidential report. A proposed resolution to move this matter is displayed on the screen. Do any councillors wish to move this into a closed session for this item? Councillor Lane wishes to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bradley has second. I'll now open the floor to vote. All those in favour? Been carried unanimously. The motion has been carried. The meeting is now closed to the public. The live stream has recommenced. Back in open session, do I have a move for the motion? Councillor Lane. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Motion has been carried. He's going to do the same one. Yeah. Even though he's doing that one. Yeah. Yeah. Item 7.1, we do have a late report, is the Logan Water Customer Commitment Statement for Water and Wastewater Services and Key Service Standards, a public report, led again by Mr Paul Heaton.
Through the chair, thank you. As I said, this is the third paper. Under our operating legislation, we are required to prepare and publish a customer commitment statement. Council currently has a customer commitment statement that is available to the public. I think we have to review it every 5 years. So this is that review. We've conducted that review in conjunction with the customer engagement corporate area of council. We've tweaked some of the wording and updated it to some of the latest style guides, etc. We have a number of key performance indicators that we seek to operate to. Following council's hopefully endorsement, this will go out for public comment via the Have Your Say website. Clearly, based on the feedback that we get from that, we will potentially come back to council to seek its final endorsement. But as I say, this is an existing document that we're required to have. We are merely updating it and modernising it to our current standards.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr Chair, through you. So, I love Logan Water and I love their response times when things go wrong in my community. Unfortunately, the community doesn't quite understand why we can't fix things straight away. So a good example was Birren Street recently, the park. Water pouring out, and it was pouring out for a while. Residents contacting me saying, "Councillor, what are you doing about this?" I said, "Absolutely nothing. I'm leaving it to Logan Water." But they don't quite understand why we can't shut the water off on some occasions. And I'm just wondering whether or not as part of that communication strategy, when we have something that's going to take, say, a week of water running and free flowing and people going, it's being wasted, that we can actually have a document that goes out to surrounding residents to say, hey, we're waiting on a part from China or wherever it may be. Please be patient with us. We're not wasting that much water. It's okay. Because we've actually been conditioned to freak out when we see water running. Yeah. So just some feedback on that. But Logan Water, response, perfect. Love it.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Through the chair, I probably agree with Councillor Lane. I've had people commenting about various, why is this taking so long for Logan Water to do X, Y, Z? I mean, I don't know. I'm not Logan Water. But, yeah, the communication for me is massive to constituents. But my main reason for putting my hand up, I don't know who helped you with the wordsmithing, but I do feel uncomfortable with that second sentence because you're referring to commitment twice within the sentence. It just doesn't flow very well for me. That's all.
Through the chair, we'll have a look at that and we can certainly update that before we go out to public comment.
No further questions? I thought you were going to ask another one. Is there a move for the report? Councillor Lane. Is there a seconder? Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Does anyone have any general business for the Group Manager of Logan Water? Councillor Lane.
So again, recently we've had a few water leaks in my area. I just want to say a big thanks to the crew. They've been absolutely wonderful in being responsive to try and let me know what's going on, and it's very much appreciated. But again, it's that fear from people on the water usage. But the team that you have at Logan Water are magic. They really are responsive to residents' concerns and they do the right thing by them. So just pass along a big thanks. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Thank you, Mr Heaton and Ms Blanchard, for coming down and making Councillor Lane happy. Easy job. That concludes the agenda for today. Does anyone have any general business for Director Mr Silvio Trinca? Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Earlier in today's committee, I raised the important issue of Glen Road and its current state of supporting a lot of traffic with not a lot of infrastructure. Now, even though it's just a road and it's just bitumen and dirt, it affects people's everyday lives. And a local resident, Tian Lian, she reached out to me and she said to me, quote, more and more residents are moving into Logan Reserve, but she's not seeing upgrades appropriate to secure their safety. Now, I raised this concern with the road planners earlier in the committee, and they're doing some good work across the city. I asked them what can be done to improve the situation on Glen Road, and at the end of the day, it's up to the councillors. So I proposed this general business motion, and what this general business motion does is enable an investigation and a discussion around what can get done at that unupgraded section of Glen Road. I'll read it out for clarity, quote, that the Director of Transport and Water Services be requested to present a report to a future City Infrastructure Committee containing information on the current state, future plans and potential options for improvements associated with the undeveloped section of Glen Road located at the coordinates of that undeveloped section. Now, what this does is it doesn't make a decision to upgrade the road, unfortunately, for the residents in Logan Reserve today, but what it does do is allow the road planners to go away, do up a report, come back to us with at least options as to how we can upgrade it and what are the funding opportunities. I think at the very least we should have a discussion around this important issue in Logan Reserve, and I'm happy to move the motion when appropriate. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. I have some questions. Councillor Bradley.
I very much appreciate Councillor Heremiah bringing this up, but those coordinates, I have no concept of where that is. Presumably it's in Logan Reserve, is that right? I'm just wondering if you want to add that to your... I have an issue as well with Rochdale Road, which borders on with Brisbane, and I probably will be looking for some sort of recommendation too for that particular section of road, which is on our listing for improvements, but it has to be coordinating with Brisbane, so that's part of the issue. And I'm very, very grateful that the council officers have been briefing me about their meetings with council officers in Brisbane. But I just want to foreshadow that I will be doing something similar.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. I get where you're going, but I'm confused by this because we had Mr Rowley just sitting in the room saying that that road was already on a list. I thought he said that it was already on a list. Is that right, Director?
Mr Riley's still hiding in the back of the room, so we can get confirmation.
Come on, Darryl, Rebecca.
But yes, he said that it's on a rehabilitation list, so that will only replace the road and upgrade the road like for like. He did confirm that it would not upgrade the road to the standard that has been upgraded to for trunk infrastructure. However, it will be considered in the list that will come back to council during the consideration of the next LGIP plan, Local Government Infrastructure Plan, which will consider that road component in a conjunction with all other roads that are associated with LGIP.
Thanks. The reason why I asked that question is not because I want to say no to this, it's quite simply because to me that just says it's already on a list and we're asking for a report to say that it's already on a list. The report doesn't say, are there accidents occurring on that road? Are there, safety concerns relating to pedestrians? It doesn't tell us what the report actually wants other than it's on a list, which it's already on a list. And I'm confused by it, that's all. It's just, to me, it says, tell me something that we already know that's already on there, so I'd love, yeah.
So we've got a couple of councillors ask questions, but before we do that, I'll go to Councillor Heremiah to answer those.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It talks about the current state of the road. So if the council officers deem it appropriate to include traffic statistics, statistics on injuries, statistics on what the community thinks, anecdotal evidence, anything they want, they can include it in the current state of the report, which they have scope to do. What this report will do that the current lists don't is talk about how we can improve the situation. We understand it's on the list for potential rehabilitation in 2026. We understand that it's included in a long-term town planning document, that it will have to consider different roads around the city. But what all of that doesn't do is talk about how can we make the situation better. That's what this report and general business is about. Quote, potential options for improvements. That's what the residents in Logan Reserve expect, that we understand it might be on a long-term plan, but it's a unique situation with difficulties to develop because of government policy around flood mapping. So let's at least look into how we can improve the situation. The current state of how council has its documents laid out doesn't consider how we can make it better. Thank you.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Lane? You all good? Councillor St Ledger?
I probably had similar questions to Councillor Lane, and I can see exactly where you're coming from, Councillor Jeremiah, because there's obviously plenty of those sorts of roads right across the city. Probably my only concern is that if we're bringing every road from every division within our city and then asking our directors and services to do individual reports on those, it's really going to tie up a lot of those people's times where I just don't know if this is the right solution. Like, I 100% get where you're coming from, and the residents, you know, looking at those options. If we're asking for a detailed report on every single road in all the divisions, like as we all understand sitting around here, that we've got these issues right across the city, I don't know how productive that's going to be, whereas we can look at trying to gather that information through talking to the directors and stuff and then feeding that back to our communities. So I'm probably a little bit confused with.
So Councillor St Ledger, you're worried that hasn't happened, but you're worried that that could create a chain reaction. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, 100%. If we set a precedent that this is going to be the case, that we could be sitting in here in every infrastructure meeting with lists and lists and lists and creating more and more work, and may not be getting the outcomes we require. I agree with the outcome you need for that, 100%, but just don't know if this is just don't know what sort of precedent this could set.
Would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The precedent that I think this will set is when there's a rural road that's one way in, one way out, that has experienced 190 houses being built on it in 4 years and hasn't been touched in this section. Council should do some homework, and council should consider different options. There's many different funding options available. We should at least have a report come back to identify, maybe we can push it up in this schedule. Maybe LIP can be used to a certain degree to assist in this upgrade. Without that, the community doesn't have transparency over what the current state, what the future plans are, and if council's improving the current situation. So I understand the concerns about precedent. I understand that, but this would be a healthy precedent. This would be a good thing to say, that when many, many residents have voiced serious issues around safety, when many, many residents have raised reasonable concerns regarding the population growth using this road and not seeing a single upgrade at this section, I think that's good precedent, not bad precedent.
Councillor Bradley?
Thank you. Yes, I did put my hand up when the precedent was set because I was thinking the same for my area, and I very much support divisional councillors supporting their area, and that's what you're elected for. So, but my question to the director, you referred to the LGIP. Will the LGIP refer to this road, and will the LGIP also refer to Rochdale Road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware at this stage what the presentation process will look like for the local government infrastructure plan. It is led by was EDNS. It now has another name. I am terribly sorry, it escapes my mind. But that process will be a process which will be led by that team with input from our transport planning area on the roads. I'm not sure of what the format of that will look like at this stage.
But from that, the statement of intent for trunk road infrastructure, which is a statement of intent for Rochdale Road and Johnson Road, which are very similar boundary roads with Brisbane City Council, are already included on that statement of intent. I'm not sure if Glen Road is included on that statement of intent, but that's the natural progression that happens. It ends up in a review of the statement of intent in priority, and this report could actually address where it sits, if it sits on any existing statement of intent, if it doesn't. So that, that would be a potential benefit of.
You finished, Councillor Bradley? Yep. So this could be a mechanism to get it on SOI if it wasn't.
This is a precedent that will be potentially healthy, but I am conscious of Councillor St Ledger's concerns that if every councillor at every meeting raises a similar item, that we will be having lots of reports coming to committee just about where it might sit on a program.
Councillor Hall.
I don't see that as an issue. Like, this is a particular road that residents have raised with their local councillor. Their councillor is doing their job and is bringing the attention of it to council and the other councillors in the room, so they understand the major concerns in his area, which is this road. And I'm very similar. I've got a very similar problem to Councillor Heremiah in that I've got growing pains where I've got a greenfield developments just absolutely taking earshot, yet they're reliant on really, really old roads, which were only ever designed for rural traffic. But they've got extreme residential development happening and a lot of traffic happening on these roads. The worst part of it is, as those greenfield areas are being developed, a lot of trucks are going through, and some of these roads are really suffering under the weight of these trucks, yet residents are also using them. I think we've got a major issue here with some of these greenfield areas with their roads. The roads are just too old to take the traffic and the congestion on them. And, I've got one particular road, which is Tees Road, which is in an area which is captured within an overlay where no development will happen because it's caught in that overlay. So that if it's relying on trunk infrastructure, that road will never be developed, ever. It's on the list as many of these other roads, but it's not anywhere as a priority, and work is likely to happen within the next 20 years. Not within the next 5 years, not within the next 4 years. And by then, I could perceive that it will only ever get worse because we'll have even more greenfield. I honestly think council needs to relook its way that it's addressing these roads. I think we need to move them up in terms of a priority in what we're doing. We've got all these other great things that we're doing, but really, road should be our main priority right now. It should be the main thing that we're doing because this is our biggest problem. This is the biggest concern, and we'll probably find that in terms of fatalities and whatever else, they're mostly happening on roads. So, I acknowledge Councillor Heremiah's concern, and I think he's done the right thing by bringing it up. I don't think there's an issue with councillors raising roads because it kind of reminds us what are the big issues that are happening in our divisions, and it should be happening more often. And look, I'd be on board with actual reform, roads reform, in terms of how much money we're putting towards this area of council and how much of our business is actually allocated to it. Because if we keep going the way we're going, we're never going to have these roads done in the lifetime of us as councillors.
Councillor Hall, wrap you up a bit, mate. We got your point there. Very passionate. I'd be saying just keep a look on your SOIs, and when we do come up and we vote on these SOIs, so the SOIs get adopted by council. So everyone should know where their roads are concerned about on the SOI, talking to the staff like Councillor Jeremiah is doing about bringing it forward. And then when we bring the SOIs up for adoption, then we go through the roads there. So we had Councillor St Ledger.
Probably with me, the point of interest, because Councillor Jeremiah, we've got a similar road that actually borders Councillor Bannon and my division. Pretty much very similar to like what you say there. It was a rural road, now it's been built up as residential. Comes out onto a T intersection over a crest, which is quite dangerous, and there's an option there to possibly look at taking that road out further. Question probably more for Daryl and Silvio. Can you see this process being more efficient, and like you've already done, Councillor Jeremiah, or is it more efficient for our residents to get an outcome and an answer by asking the questions of the relevant departments to get answers for a safer and better outcome for the community? Because your road presents exactly that. And just from envisioning it, I would say it would look exactly like you're talking about there, Councillor Jeremiah. Very old, in its time was right, but now for what's in there, it's not. So I'm just trying to figure out if this will be a more effective process for everyone, or looking at other avenues.
I'll probably let the director answer that question.
Yeah, look, I suppose, and Councillor Jeremiah has done this, the first step is always for the residents to inquire through the officers of where that road project might sit. You know, does it sit on an existing program? What are the plans? At the point in time when they're advised of that information, there comes a point in time where if they're not happy with that response, the only other option is to raise it with the local councillor. And at that point in time, it's up to the local councillor to advocate, raise concerns, ask the questions, exactly which is what Councillor Jeremiah has done. So I think that the process is always for the resident to approach either through you, the councillors, and we provide that information back to you. But then if that response is not conducive to the wishes of the resident, there's obviously the plans to take it further. You have to understand that as councillors, yes, you do advocate for your own division, but you have to look and you act on the benefit of the whole council. That's your role. It doesn't say you act for your council division, it says you act for council. So you have to take a whole of council approach, and priorities are, that's what a priority of funding is all about. You know, taking a whole of council approach of, you know, what is the highest priority. A 200 metre section of Glen Road compared to the upgrade of Park Ridge Road that has thousands of properties, not hundreds. You know, again, you have to balance what the priority is in that funding. We do not have unlimited funding to be able to do every road, and that's why you have statements of intent, that's why you prioritise, and that's why you as councillors allocate funding to projects.
Thank you, Mr Trinker. Councillor Lane, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Thanks very much. Through you, Mr Chair, I foreshadow that at the next City Infrastructure Committee meeting, I'll be asking for the exact same update on Ewing Road, Barton Road, Jacaranda Avenue, Railway Parade, Dewars Street and 3rd Avenue, all of which take traffic from Logan Reserve, Park Ridge, Chambers Flat, Marsden, Crestmead, Logan Lee, Waterford West and Bethania. Thousands of extra cars every day on my local roads, no traffic lights, people sitting in their streets for 10 minutes waiting to get out, people speeding through local suburban streets. We're not allowed to put speed humps through them. So I'll actually be asking for the exact same thing at the next committee and expecting some, well, that's a lot of reports to write, isn't it? But my people matter too.
And you could generalise that report, and they'll make all of them different reports and look after the staff, which you would because you're the former infrastructure. I will wrap it. Oh, okay, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not. After this discussion, I'm not ready to be able to vote for or against this. So I'm in at this point, I may need to abstain, but this question might be able to help me. From this conversation, I've seen some really good arguments on both sides. Where I'm left with though is that on the one side we have we have an entire city to consider, and we have a list that I imagine is taking all of these necessary roads into account. But then on the other side, I did get a little inkling from the director, perhaps that this process is required to be done for this particular situation. Can I just clarify that? Is it that this process will be necessary for this road to be considered fairly against other roads in similar situations, or is this just a process to be able to get it moved ahead against, once this report comes back, I won't necessarily then still be able to consider it against other roads in the city. So that's my concern.
So to clarify, the best time to consider a particular road is in conjunction with all other roads that would fit within that funding program. This report would identify at least where the funding program is, where it sits, is it on a statement of intent or not. So that's what the report would do. I'm not imagining that it would make any recommendations to reprioritise whatever. That's up to council to consider. That's not asking for that in the report, it's asking for options. There will be a process, I'm sure, that the new director over the next 6 months will be considering about bringing statements of intents back to council. It's a new council, first year of their term, it's appropriate time to bring statements of intent back. So I'm making commitments on behalf of the new director, but I'm assuming that he would be able to look at prioritising those statements of intent so that the ones where the infrastructure, key trunk infrastructure sort of program might be the first one that he reviews. We know we're doing a review on master drainage, so that will be another statement of intent that will come before council in the next 6 months. The difficulty is always where councillors are asked to make decisions of reprioritisation without understanding the unintended consequences. What is the road going to be pushed back? So, yes, I agree. If there's not enough information in this report, you won't necessarily be able to make a decision about funding for this project or reprioritising this project. But that's not what I take from that recommendation there. It's just options, providing options. It's not making a recommendation, it's providing options, and then it's up for councillors to consider those options when it comes back before you.
I'll wrap it up. You finished, Councillor Russell? Yes. So I'll wrap it up. Councillor, am I happy to move the motion?
Happy to
Councillor
move this
Murphy's-
for information motion.
Just through the chair, do we need to clarify that address better? Do you need to put Glen Road, Logan Reserve? Is that correct, Councillor Harriman?
Ordinance goes straight to that section.
Okay, I'm just seeking your clarity. Do you need to add that as well?
You can second? You said
Yeah,
before,
I'll still second.
Seconded. All those in favour? Councillor, I can't see Councillor Fraser. Everyone, that's unanimous except for Councillor Lane.
Against.
Councillor St Legend. Oh, and Councillor Stamp.
Against also.
St Ledger.
Yeah, against.
You got it all? No, you were full, eh? Yeah. Yeah. So it has been carried. This concludes the agenda for today of the Infrastructure Committee on the 11th of June, concluded at 11:02. Well done, in an hour. Thank you.